toiva is meruba al midas pranius. So why is it that they got a whole year of punishment for just one day? So I forgot who Rabbi Elephant spoke out from, but he said that was actually a toiva, because the reason why they got 40 years was so that they should live 40 years. The einish that they would stay in the midbar 40 years got them 40 years. If they would have went right away into Eretz Yisrael, then they would have died right away because they weren't supposed to get into Eretz Yisrael. So the 40 days was actually a leniency, a bracha, not a stringency. So therefore it was extended. Their einish was extended because it wasn't really to extend their einish; it was really to extend their lives. Okay, so let's see the Hilek Gemara Vayter. Ei zehu katan kol she'ena yachal lirkoiv al kseifa shalavet. The bottom line of Hamid Beis, the Mishnah is telling us a katan has to be brought up by his parents for chinuch. At what age? At the age that he could ride on his father's shoulders, which is a relatively young age. That was the shita of Beit Shammai, and the shita of Beis Hillel was the child has to be a little older before the child is brought to the Oiler Regel. The child has to be old enough to walk on his own 2 feet, but hold his father's hands. So Zok to Gemara, Maskif law Reb Zeir. Reb Zeir had a kasha. Ad hacha manasu. The Mishnah describes that the child has to be old enough to ride his father's shoulders from Yerushalayim to Har Bayis. But how did he get to Yerushalayim? Let's say he came from Tveria. How did he get there? Zok Rashi, Ad hacha manashi ad Yerushalayim yavi. Who brought this child to Yerushalayim? Baloi mishuyachal liyos chutz mi'imoi. Once this child can be away from his mother, yachal lachash biyarav. At that age, you can hold his father's hand. The chedei aliyah miYerushalayim lahar bayis at oimer sheyich mechudu. You're saying that once he's at the age where he can go from Yerushalayim to Har Bayis, that's when the chinuch starts. But v'ad Yerushalayim mihivyo. How did he get till Yerushalayim? Omer le'abaye. Oh, so the Gemara asks. Everyone's focusing on. Thank you so much, Pati. Everyone's focusing on the ability of this child to be able to get from Yerushalayim to Har Bayis. But how did the child get from Tveria or from Eilat? How did he get to Yerushalayim? So Zokt Abaye, Omer le'abaye, Ad hacha the mechayve ime besimcha I see se ime. Although the women might not be mechuyev to come to the Beis Hamikdash, but they are mechuyev in the mitzvah of simcha. Dr. Rashi, what mitzvah of simcha? Lalois l'regel v'l'smoach b'chagim baila. She has a mitzvah to come with her husband to Yerushalayim to spend a beautiful Yom Tov with her husband. Dala simcha nitztavu noshim. Women have the mitzvah of simcha. Dichsiv v'samachta ata u'veisecha. So I guess we see it's not just simcha that baila mesamcha. She has to be party to the simcha. So she also has to come to Yerushalayim. So therefore, it is v'samachta ata u'veisecha.
What would happen if a woman doesn't have a husband anymore? Does her simcha depend on the husband?
The Gemara discusses it. That the community has to be misalecha. Yeah. So Dr. Gemara, At hacha the machayv ime b'simcha. I see say ime. Her mother, the child's mother, would bring the child. Mikan ve'elach. But moving forward, going up to Yerushalayim, then im yochel lalish v'lechash b'yadish alaviv, which is the shita of Beis Hillel. If the child is old enough that he could hold his father's hand and walk up to Yerushalayim Har Bayis, tayiv v'loipa. Heishiv Rebbe tachas Beis Hillel m'divrei Beis Shammai. Rebbe asked Akasha on Beis Shammai. Good morning. Rebbe asked Akasha on Beis Shammai to defend to support Beis Hillel. It says as follows: the Chana loy also Chana after she was zeicha to have Shmuel Hanavi born to her, she stopped coming with her husband to Yerushalayim. She stayed home. The Chana loy also Chana didn't go. Ki amra leisha, she told her husband, Ad yigomel hanar, I want to wait till the child's a little bit older. And Rashi says that means 24 months. And then Babi Yosy. Where did Chana live? Does anyone know where Chana lived? What city she lived in? Elkanah.
No.
She lived in Elkanah. Right? Elkanah was her husband. They didn't live in Yerushalayim. You know where they lived? I don't know.
They weren't going to Yerushalayim. According to this, they were going to Shiloh.
What?
They were going to Shiloh, not Yerushalayim.
Oh, that was in Shiloh. So maybe they were from Yerushalayim. We don't know where. I don't know where they're from. Okay, the Zok to Gemara. Well, Shmuel, when he's already almost 2 years old, the Yachal Lirkoi, Al Kaseifa Shalaviv, Hava, he was a child who was old enough to sit on his father's shoulders. So how come they weren't Mechuyev to bring Shmuel to the Beis Hamikdash? Why is it that Chana was allowed to remain home with him? Let's see Rashi.
They were going to Mishkan, not the. They were going to the Mishkan, not the.
Right. Not the Beis Hamikdash. That's right. He was from Ramasayim, okay? From remote Aleph, remote base, remote Gil, all the Ramasayim. Okay. Okay, I hear. That's how long the child nurses in those days. When he's already a year old, he could ride his father's shoulders. From Shiloh to the actual Mishkan, from the city of Shiloh to where the Mishkan in Shiloh was, surely would have been simple. Zok to Gemara, Amalei Avua. So his Avua said, so I guess it's Rebbe. Who's Rebbe? Who is Rebbe the son of?
Rebbe's father.
I'm sorry?
Rebbe's the son of Rebbe's father.
Okay, good. Ulatamech. Yeah.
Reb Shimon ben Gamliel.
Okay, so Shimon ben Gamliel said, according to your approach, forget about why Shmuel wasn't brought up by his father to be Oil Regal to the Mishkan. But Chana Gufa, was she not Muchayiv to come with her husband to spend Yom Tov together? Ella, what are you going to have to say? Chana, she saw that Shmuel was a particularly sickly, weak child. And she was afraid that if he would have to travel all the way from Ramasayim to Shiloh, it would hurt Shmuel. Shmuel wouldn't be able to handle the rigors of the road, and therefore she didn't send him. So that explains it. You don't have a kasha. He could have went up to Yerushalayim. He could have went up to the Mishkan from Shiloh. He was a weakly child, and therefore he remained at home. Zok the Gemara back here. Boy, Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon has a shayla. What is the halacha? Katan chigar, a katan who is not able to walk. So we know an adult who's not able to walk is potter. What about a katan who's not able to walk? It's different Beis Shammai, according to Beis Shammai, that the child doesn't have to walk. Once the child is old enough to ride on the shoulders of his father, he can go, so he doesn't need to be able to walk. Or Vesuma or a Suma L'Divrei Shneim, even according to Beis Hillel. So let's see Rashi. Katan chigar l'divrei Beis Shammai, Vesuma L'Divrei Shneim. Dilu chigar l'divrei Beis Hillel, lo miboil. The lo mechmachim. It's surely according to Beis Hillel, where a child has to be able to walk, a chigar, you're not mecham. The Hamrina, we said, ein nechanchim elo l'katan sheyachal lechos v'lalos b'raglo b'Yerushalayim. The child has to be able to go on his own legs to Yerushalayim. And this child cannot. Once the child's old enough just to take a shoulder ride, well then katan chigar yachal lirkoiv al kaseifer shalav. So maybe there should be a chiyuv chinuch to the child. Or vasuma yachal lechos l'beis Hillel. According to Beis Hillel, asuma, even though asuma is potter, but asuma could hold on to his father's hand. So we need to add some information. Because right off the bat, why would you be mechanech someone to do a mitzvah? The whole purpose of chinuch is so that when they're of age, they can do the mitzvah. But if they can't do the mitzvah when they're of age, why would we be mechanech them? So the Gemara explains right away. she'ena yachal is pashe, besuma she'ena yachal is pateach. If we're speaking about a condition that will not be healed, well then hashta gadol potter. A gadol with this condition is potter, and these children will never come to the chiyuv. So surely there shouldn't be a chiyuv to be mechanech the child. Zok Rashi, very important. Good morning. The whole purpose of chinuch is to get him into the habit of doing this mitzvah when he becomes a gadol. The chivin shezeh potter l'chesheyagdil, since this child will be potter from a lila regal when this child becomes an adult. Lama l'chinuch. Why would we be mechanech a child to do something that he's not mechuyev to do even when he's a gadol? So therefore, the Gemara has to qualify the question. But we're talking about a chigir, someone who has some type of impediment to his walk, but it could be healed. Or v'suma sheyachal lehis pateach. And Rashi sticks in koidim sheyagdil. We have to be mechalachim because this is a condition that might be healed before the child becomes an adult, which means as soon as the child becomes an adult, the likelihood is that the child will be mechuyev in a lila regal.
Because one of the rebels from Bells, when he was a young kid, he wanted to eat on the kitchen.
It's funny that when you refer to the Belzer Rebbe, it was like from the greatest of all Rebbes, you call him Rebbe.
No, because I'm talking about when he's a kid.
Uh-huh.
No, that's what I meant. That's the show.
Okay.
I meant the Rebbe when he was little.
Okay.
Right? So the father tells the kid, "You want to go eat? You got to go make him kippus." The father says to the son, "You want to go eat?
Make kiddush."
Make kiddush. The son says, "Well, what are you talking about when I make kiddush? The whole reason I have to make kiddush is
because chinuch. When I'm an adult, I want to make kiddush.
I'm going to be fasting."
Oh, very good.
How's that?
So the father gave him a frask. So his father gave him a frask. So his father gave him a frask and said, "Go make kiddush." Okay, so talk to Gemara weiter. So what is the halacha? Is there a chiyuv chinuch? Omer Abaye, kol heicha the gadol mechayev midaraisa. Any condition that a gadol would be mechuyev under this condition midaraisa to do the mitzvah, katan nami mechnachinin lay midarabanan. There's a chiyuv midarabanan to be mechanech a child. Kol heicha the gadol potter midaraisa, but if the gadol is potter midaraisa, then midarabanan katan nami potter, the cotton will be potter. So Abayis Paskin, since right now, under these circumstances, a gadol would not be mechuyev in riyah, there would be no chiyuv to be mechanech the child. So there's a couple of shilas about this, because any gadol that's under bar mitzvah wouldn't be mechuyev to do the mitzvah. So that negates chinuch on every mitzvah. So the Mefarshim explain it depends why there's no chiyuv now. If there's no chiyuv now because of age, that's the only condition that we don't look at, because that's the whole purpose of chinuch. But if there's any other outside condition that would pater the person, then there wouldn't be a chiyuv chinuch. So Chaim's going to like the story. Once upon a time, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal was by someone's house, and the child, he had a young child who climbed up on the table and started dancing on the table. So the father was mechanech, the father scolded him, said, "Get off the table." So Rabbi Yaakov asked him, "Why did you do that to your child?" So he said, "What are you talking about? I have to be mechanech my child." So Rabbi Yaakov says, "You only have to be mechanech your child in things that he might do later. No one as an adult would ever climb up on the table. So chinuch, to teach him something for now, that's not called chinuch. Chinuch is to teach him something now that will be relevant for later when he's a gadol. Could be you want him to be disciplined and you don't want him to, you want to jump on the table. But you can't call that the mitzvah of chinuch. The mitzvah of chinuch is training your child now something that he's going to need when he's an adult. No child's going to be jumping on a table as an adult. That doesn't require chinuch. As Yaakov told us that.
Maybe they only know not to climb on the table as an adult because you told them not to do it when they're children.
So I guess Rabbi Yaakov felt that adults normally don't climb on tables. As a matter of fact, if you climb on a table as an adult, you could break the table. You're laughing. I just read an article in Vas's Nice or in Yeshiva World that a chassan was dancing on a table, which happens often, and the table broke, and you got severely injured.
There you go. There's the perfect object lesson on why you should be mechanic your children not to stand on tables. Because when they're chasonim, it could be very dangerous.
Yeah. So then the Mishnah enters a discussion as to how much money has to be spent on each carbon. So the Mishnah told us that Beishami said the oila, which is Kula Hashem, you have to spend twice the amount of money, shtei kesef, versus the shlomim, that you only have to spend one kesef. But Basil said the opposite. The oila, where only the Rabban Shem has a chelik of it, it's enough of the one kesef. One more. But the shlomim, which the people enjoy as well, so you need two more. One more for the Rabban Shem's portion, and one more for the owner's portion, like Dr. Goldar was masbel to me by the Mishnah. So let's see the Gemara. Tell her about them. Beishamai Oimrim, Hari'ish de Kesef, the carbon Riyah is 2 Kesef, the Chagiga more Kesef. And the Chagiga is only one. Why? Shari'ah Oila Kula L'Gavaya. One reason is because the Riyah is more chashav. Why? Because it's Kula L'Gavaya. Masha'enkein bechagiga. Masha'enkein, the carbon Chagiga is half of it goes to, or a portion of it goes to the owner. That's reason number one. And reason number two is v'oid matzinu batzeres sheriba behen akasav ba'olos yosher mibishlam. You find by atzeres there were many more oilos brought in shlomim. So you see that's where the focus is. Let's see Rashi. Rashi is matzinu batzeres, but Parsha Sharai Kesef, which we learn on Yom Tov. It says v'kraftem al lechem shivas kvasim tamimim upar ben bakar echad ve'elim shnoim yu oil Hashem. So there was an abundance of oilers, and there were only ushnei kvasim b'nei shana l'zavach shlam. So you see the focus is on the oiler, so that's why we spend more money on the oiler. Uve'sil and Basil says hari'iyama kesef v'chagiga shnei kesef. We spend more money on the chagiga. Why? Shechagiga yeshna lefnei adibur ma'shenkin b'riyah. What does it mean? Yeshna lefnei adibur. They brought shlomims even before Matan Torah. Koydem Matan Torah hakrivu shlomim b'Sinai. Where do you see they brought shlomim in Sinai? The Chsiva Yishlach is Nari b'nei Yisrael, and there it talks about bringing shlomims. V'afal gav the high crop be'elam mishpotim la'achar aseres adibrois. Even though if you look at the Chumash, it seems, being that it's in Parshas Mishpatim, which is after Yisrael, which is after the Aseres Adibros, Rashi is telling us that no, Kodim Aseres Adibros happened. This story that discusses the Nari B'nai Yisrael bringing carbon shlomims actually occurred before the Aseres Adibros. Vein Muktam U'Ma'ucha B'Torah, and you cannot use the order of how something is brought down in the Torah as a riot that's how it happened chronologically. And this is what we learned in Masechah Shabbos Perek Kiva. Yosy Omer, B'Sheni Olav Yarad, B'Shlishi Olav Yarad. On the second day he went up and down. On Tuesday he went up and down. B'Revi Yarad, but on the fourth, this is the day of the Chodesh. B'Revi Yarad, B'Shuv Lo Allah. Then he didn't go up again. B'Chamishi Bonim Mizbeach V'Hikrev Olav Carbon and B'Shishi Nitna Torah. So you see the karbanos were before the Torah was given. But in his Torah, Binyam Mizbeach, you don't find any Binyam Mizbeach other than that occasion that was described in Parshas Mishpatim. So that's how we know this occurred before Matan Torah. The Gemara is going to ask, in that Maimid, where they brought karbanos before Matan Torah, they were oilers there as well. But right now we're trying to prove that shlomims existed, the mitzvah of carbon shlomim existed before Matan Torah, but not oilers. And that's why shlomim is the most important according to Basil, and that's why you spend more money on a shlomim. The oid matzinu, the nesiyim, sheriba ben akasav v'shlomim Yosy miboilers. The nesiyim, Rashi's by the Chanukas Abayis, ikrivu shlomim Yosy miboilers, they brought more shlomim than the oilers. So you see the focus is on the shlomim, the chsiv kol habakar l'oila, l'chol b'kar zevach ha-shlomim, there were many more shlomims. So now that we shared the svara of Beishamai and the svara of Basil, we need to understand why each of the two, Beishamai and Basil, don't hold like the other one's svara. So Basil, my time alone, Amar Beishamai. Why didn't they say like Beishamai? Beishamai had a good taina that the oila is kula legvaya mashenkim b'chagiga and v'oid motzinu b'atzeres that there's more oilas. But he didn't say dika amrit ri'i adifa the oila kula gevaya b'shamais taina that oila is kula gevaya, so therefore that should be worth more. Adarabba, I would say chagiga adifa. There is b'shtei achilos. There's a chila legvaya and there's a chila le'adam. Udika amrit neilach me'atzeres. I don't think you could bring a right from Shavuos because done in carbon yachid be carbon yachid, and done in carbon yachid be carbon tzibur. When we're looking to compare carbonis, we would compare a carbon yachid to a carbon yachid, not to a carbon tzibur. And by atzeres, it was a carbon tzibur, so you don't have a raya. But Rashi says Nesiim was a carbon yachid, Re'iyah the Chagiga is a carbon yachid. But the kivsei atzeres are carbonis tibur they brought from the Tumas Alishka. And we're bringing right from the Siyam, which were carbonis yachid, where there are more shloms. So why did Bisham select Beisol? So Zok the Gemara, Chagiga Adifa the Yesh Milfnei Adibur. That you want to say that Chagiga is Adam. Because it was before Adibur, because that parsha in Mishpatim was before Matan Torah. Ri'inami Yesh Milfnei Adibur. You find Riyah before Adibur as well, because Beishamai says in that Maimid over there, they brought carbon oil as well. With the garment Melech Minasim, and you want to bring the right from the Nasim, who brought more Shlomims, done in Dover Hanoig L'Doyers, Midover Hanoig L'Doyers. I'd rather learn it from Shavuos, because Shavuos is Noig L'Doyers, and we're discussing Re'iyah, which is Noig L'Doyers. Then done in Dover Hanoig L'Doyers, Midover Shein Noig L'Doyers. Zokti Gemara, Beisil, Ma'isnu Chagiga, Yeshna L'Fnei Adiva. Chagiga you're claiming was even before Matan Torah. Yichsev Vayizbechu Zavachim Shlomim Re'iyah Nami Haksiv Vayalu Oilos. In that Maimid right there, they brought Oilos. So how could you tell me that Shlomim was L'fnei Adibur because of the incident that happened in Pashas Mishpatim? They were Oilos there as well. Dr. Merka Shavri Beis Hillel Oilos Shekrivu Yisrael B'Midbar Oilos Tamar Avoy. Any carbon oil that you find Klal Yisrael brought before Matan Torah was not an oil of Re'iyah, it was an oil of a Tamid, which means Choyvas Kol Yoim V'Yoim. The oils that were brought, even the oils of that Maimid, it wasn't stam an oil of a gift, it was a Tamid, it was one of the carbonates that they brought every single day. So you see, they brought carbonates every single day in the Midbar. I don't know. They brought them. I don't know how they knew to bring them, but it can't be because of the mitzvah Torah, because the mitzvah Torah didn't exist. But we're going to soon see it is possible to have a mitzvah deraisa before Matan Torah, because they were mitzvah a certain mitzvahs b'mora. But this was part of the daily scheduled carbon. Whether there was a mitzvah, I don't know. But it's not just a spontaneous carbon, an extra carbon. It was part of the roster that was done daily. So it boils down to that. So we know there was an oil brought before Matan Torah, but the machlokes is, can you bring a raya from that? According to Beisil, you can't bring a raya because that was an oil stomach. According to Beishamai, it was oil riyah, therefore you can bring a raya. So that focuses on the focal point. That is the actual nakuda that they're arguing about. Amar Abaye, Beishamai, who holds that these carbonates were oil riyah. The Rabbi Lazar, let me just see the Bach. Beishamai, the Rab Yishmael, the Rabbi Eliezer, these three Gedoy Oilam, these three Tanoim, Kulu Svirilahu, Oila Shekruv Yisrael B'Midbar, Oila Shriyav. They all agree that it was an Oila Shriyah. Ubeis Hillel, Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Yosy Glili, Kulu Svirilahu, that Oila Shekruv Yisrael B'Midbar was an Oila Tamar. So let's see. Beishamai Hado Amar. We just said that Beishamai understood that the oilers that were brought in Parshas Mishpatim were Oila Shriyah, and therefore he sees that even Oila Shriyah were brought before Matan Torah. Rabbi Shmuel, where does Rabbi Shmuel say this? The Tanya Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Klalois Nemru B'Sinai. Here we're going to need David Zolty's help. The Klalois, the general rules were said B'Sinai. Zokt Rashi, Harbi Devarim Nemru Sustumim B'Sinai, So in the Spashul Kol Tzarcha, there were a lot of things that were presented on Sinai, but not fully elaborated upon. The details were clarified when they actually set up the Mishkan. That's when the details were clarified. By Sinai, not all the intricate details of the Avodah were clearly explained. All that it says there, we know it's in Pashas Yisroi, El Mizbach Adama Tasali, V'Zavachta Lov, Es Oilosecha, V'Shlomecha. But V'Loi Pirish Matan Tmeyin, it doesn't explain there exactly how the Zruk Saddam work, have Shaitan, that the animals were skinned, they tuchan, and how they're cut up into pieces, Shal Oilos of the Oilos, Bakrab Emun Shal Shlomim, and how the Emurin are brought. It's very, very general. So Klolos never B'Sinai, Uprata is Boil Moed. But the actual details were shared with us only once we built the Mishkan, as Rashi says, Mishukam Mishkan. The Dibur Imay Me'ala Kapayers, and that's when Hashem spoke to Moshe with the Kapayers. Sham Pirish Le'akasav later on is where the details were clarified. And in the Vayikra, the spouse called Halach is carbon, and that happened after Matan Torah. Rabbi Kiva Eimer, Klolos Upratos number Sinai. All of the details, in fact, were given over on Sinai. V'nishnu b'oil moed, but they were chazard again in the oil moed. V'nishtalshu, and they were again explained a third time. Ba'arvas moed. Rashi says v'nishnu pam shenis in the oil moed. V'chol ma'shenemer kan nemer kan v'alfa b'shloi nichtav. All of the details given in Parashas Vayikra, in fact, were given over by Har Sinai, even though we don't see it written in the Psukim. V'nishtalshu ba'arvas moed. Mipi Moshe liYisrael, shenemar be'eber hayadin be'eretz Moav, hoil Moshe be'eretz HaTorah. And there are those who fail the Chassidus. But why was it said three times? Sinai was appealing to our minds. Sinai was giving us information. The oil moed refers to our lay, to our kedusha, to our spirits, and Arvis Moav is where it's appealing to our guf. So the Rebbeinu Shalom presented us the details of the avodah, the moyach, the ruach, and the guf, in all three dimensions. If you're going to say that the oil that Klai were brought in the midbar was oilus tamid, how is it possible? Mi kamidi the meikara loy boy have shit netuach. If you say, like Rabbi Shmuel said, that only the klolos were given in Sinai, but the details weren't given until later on. So are you going to say that until the details were given, where the Torah explained that it has to be the tuach and hefshit by the oila, are you telling me at the beginning they didn't do it that way? By hefshit and the tuach, it's not logical to suggest that that's how it happened. I'm sorry? You just touched on the Gemara's kasha that's going to undo this whole thing. But then at this point, only the oila tamid needs hefshit and the tuach.
There's evidence that not everything, a lot of the mitzvahs may have been given in Har Sinai, but they weren't transmitted from Moshe to the Bnei Yisrael until much later, until maybe it was relevant, or because there are psukim that say, this is taka what the Rebbeinu Shalom told me on Har Sinai. I forgot where it is, but
I guess. But Lagabi the Avodah, Moshe would have been in charge. So whatever was told to him would have been.
Lagabi Avodah, but I'm talking in general.
Could be other mitzvahs.
Not everything was transmitted. Yeah.
So Moshe gave it to them on a need to know basis.
and in some cases, yes.
Okay. So here the Gemara is asking, since the klolos should never be Sinai and Hefshit Pintuach was likely not, how could you say that it was the carbon tamid? You're saying earlier the carbon tamid was brought without Hefshit Pintuach and later on it changed? That's not logical. So you have a Rai from here that Rabbi Shmuel, who says that Dafka klolos never be Sinai and not Pratos, must have learned that it was not an oilus tamid, it was an oilus reed. So that's how we prove that Rabbi Shmuel holds, like Beishamai, that the oilus in the midbar were oilus reed. Rabbi Lazar is the third Tana who holds like this. The Tanya, oilas tamid hasui by Sinai. We say this in Karbonis every day. Rabbi Lazar explains this as follows. Rabbi Lazar Eimer, Maisel nemer b'Sinai. its meisim were told to us in Sinai, but the he atzma loy karva, it was not brought. It was not brought. Rashi says the he atzma loy karva, and therefore the oilish akriva b'chayrish oilish riyahava. Rabbi Lazar says even though the Torah tells us about the carbon tomid by Sinai, it was not brought until later. Meaning any oilish that you might find were brought earlier were not oilish tomid with oilish riyah. So now we have Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Lazar, who we've shown agree with Beis Shammai that the oilish that were brought before were definitely not oilish tamid; they were oilish riyah, which is consistent with Beis Shammai. Rabbi Kiva says karva. Actually, they started bringing the carbon tamid right away. The shuv pascha, and it never ever stopped. The shuv pascha, it never ever stopped. Now we don't bring it. So the Mepharshim tell us now we say karbanos. We say karbanos. It's in the Shalma Parim Shevasenu, so it's Takaloi Pascha even nowadays. Elamani Mekayim Hazvachim Umincha Higashim Liba Midbar Arbaim Shana, and this was the Rebbeinu Shalom was mourning Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael, they did the egel. They were sort of pushed aside in the Midbar. They were in the Zufin, Rashi says. So the Navi tells us that they were asked, "Did you bring Zvachim and Mincha? Did you bring these karbanos in the Midbar 40 years?" Hazvachim u'mincha higashim midbar b'amshah Beis Yisrael. So you see over here that in the Midbar they didn't bring their karbanos. So how could you, Rabbi Kiva, say like Pascha? You see from that rhetorical question that they didn't bring these karbanos in the Midbar. And for the Gemara, Shifta Shalevi Shalei Abdu Avodah Zarah Heinik Krivoisa. Even though Klal Yisrael were not involved in the karbanos in the Midbar because they're in the Zuvin because of the Aveir of the Egel, nevertheless, Shevet Levi did bring these karbanos all along. So in fact, it was like Pascha. Okay, so that was the first set of information. We found two Tanoim, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Lazar, who agree with Beis Shammai. Now, let's look at the three Tanoim that we say agree with Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel, who says that the karbanos were carbon tomids, Hadamorit. Beis Hillel said it was a carbon tomid. That's why you can't bring a raya that an oilish re'iyah was brought before Matan Torah. Rabbi Kiva, Hanami Damaran. We just said from Rabbi Kiva that the oilish tomid was introduced by Sinai and Shuvlei Pascha. So that's the second shita who is consistent with Beis Hillel. Rabbi Yosy Agilili Tanya. Rabbi Yosy Agilili Omer Shalosh mitzvahs mitzdavu Yisrael ba'aloisam l'regel. There were three mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael have to do when they come to the Eilereg, as follows: Re'iyah, Chagiga, the Simcha. There are three individual mitzvahs. Zakt, the Gemara. Let's explain the differences, the nuances of each of these three mitzvahs. So Re'iyah is to come, Chagiga is to bring the carbon Chagiga, and Simcha is to bring Shalmei Simcha. Rashi says, what do you mean? You have Chagiga, so why do you need extra Shalmei Simcha? So Rashi says, Simcha, Af Heim Shalmei Simcha, Im Ein Loi Basar Shlomim, Shal Neder Unedava, Shnesnadev Kol Hashana, Shemevim Beregel. If you don't have enough meat between the Basar Shlomims that you might have been noider throughout the year, or Veloy Ma'asher Beima, you don't have any Ma'asher Beima, so you need meat. Maybe Shlomim Mishaloi, you could either bring Shlomim from money that you have of Chulin, Oimi Mois Ma'asher Sheni Shaloi, or if you have Mois Ma'asher Sheni, you can buy a carbon Shlomim with that money. Liyas Le Basar Le Soiva, so you should have plenty of meat. Shein Simchas Achag Ela B'Basar. Simchas Achag is B'Basar. So Zok Gemara, Yesh Re'iyah Shein B'Shtei. There are certain features of the mitzvah of Re'iyah that does not apply to the other two mitzvahs. Yesh Chagiga Shein B'Shtei. Yesh and Yesh B'Simcha Shein B'Shtei. So each one of these mitzvahs have unique qualities, unique features that don't apply to the others. Yesh Re'iyah Shein B'Shtei. What's unique about the mitzvah of Re'iyah? She'ein b'shteihen. Yesh Re'iyah she'ein b'shteihen. She're'iyah oila kula l'gavaya. The oilish re'iyah is kula l'gavaya. It's in the carbon oila. Mashenke b'shteihen, mashenke the chagiga and the simcha, they're all things that we partake in. Yesh b'chagiga mashen b'shteihen. There's something unique about the chagiga that the others don't have. She'chagiga yeshna l'fnei adibur. The carbon chagiga, the shlomim, exist before the divar. Ma'ashein b'shtein. The other two, the re'iyah and the simcha, don't have that. Well, let's hear Rashi. Shechagiga yeshna l'fnei divar. Oisan shlomim shekrivu habechayos. Those shlomim that the bechayos brought, aval pi shaloi beregel hikrivim, even though they were not on a Yom Tov, Chagiga Nikru. They're still called Chagiga. Shobehen Niskayim V'Yachogli Bamidbar. Those karbonis described in Maseches Mishpatim. When we tried to get out of Mitzrayim, what was Moshe telling Paroi? Let us out V'Yachogli Bamidbar. When did we ever do that V'Yachogli Bamidbar? We wouldn't lie to Paroi, would we? We must have had to do that V'Yachogli. So when did they do V'Yachogli? It was that Ma'abed in Mishpatim when they brought those carbon shlomins. Bamidbar Shenemar Lambe Mitzrayim. So that was the V'Yachogli Bamidbar. So you find Chagiga L'fnei Dibur, but you don't find Shalmei Simcha, you don't find the regular Shlomim, and you don't find the Eilish Re'iyah before. And then Yesh B'Simcha, Ma'ashein B'Shtein. There's also something unique with the mitzvah of Simcha that doesn't apply to Chagiga and to Re'iyah. Shesimcha Nohages Ba'anashim U'V'Nashim, Ma'ashein B'Shtein, that are only mitzvahs for males. Rashi says, Simcha next B'Nashim, D'chsiv V'Samachta, Atu V'Secha, like Rashi quoted earlier, Ma'ashein B'Shtein. Why aren't women mechuyev in Re'iyah? Why are women not mechuyev in Shalmei Simcha? In Chagiga? The mitzvah says man gramahin because of loy riba isa. We actually learned that it wasn't only because of mitzvah says man grama. We had psukim as well to be ma'it noshim, because you would have thought that you make a gzer shava from hakka. They had shalom. They had shalom. They brought a shlomim in the midbar. They said to Pyro, they told Pyro, we're going to go have a little party in the midbar. It wasn't the actual chagiga that we bring on Yom Tov, but it was in that class. What? The chag was we had a vacation from Pyro. We had a vacation from Mitzrayim. Oh, that's right. That's right. So you have to go to a grill in Miami. But Rashi asks Shukasha, and Rashi says it's called a chagiga. Shobehen niskayim v'yachogli b'midbar. It's a good kasha. Rashi asked that kasha, and Rashi answers because they were being makayim the mitzvah, or they were makayim what they said v'yachogli b'midbar when they brought those kabbalas. So it's a good kasha. Rashi asked the kasha.
Put the name in the Rashi, Johnny. What are your Johnny? From Rashi till now.
Rabbi Yishmael, my timer, kamukas like Shammai. Why? So now the Gemara is going to ask what Moti asked earlier. Rabbi Yishmael, my timer, kamukas like Shammai. Why were you forced to say that Rabbi Shmuel holds like Shammai? Rabbi Shmuel was the one who said that klolos, number of Sinai, but not the pratim. And the Gemara asked, if that's the case, how is it possible that there was an oilus tamid and that before they brought it without the tuach levshit, and now they brought it with tuach levshit? So what was the reason why Rabbi Shmuel we said it like Shammai? Because this reason, like I just said, so Zok the Gemara asked the kasha, and Moti asked this kasha. For Rabbi Yosy Glili, the Amar Oila Shekruvi Yisrael B'Midbar was Oilas Tamar Avoy. Rabbi Yosy Glili held it was the Oilas Tamar. So how come he doesn't have the same problem? Meikar Loi Boy Havshet Nituach, Ulubusoy Boy Havshet Nituach. You'll have the same problem. The Tanya Rabbi Yosy Glili Aimer Oila Shekruvi Yisrael B'Midbar Eina Tuna Havshet Nituach. Ulubishain Havshet Nituach Elamoi Oil Moed Veilach. So Gemara is Sami B'Kan Rabbi Shmuel. Oh, so I'm sorry. Moti asked the kasha about the oilus re'iyah. Why doesn't the oilus re'iyah have the same problem? But I guess that wasn't the kasha. The kasha was, why doesn't Rabbi Yosy Glili have the same issue? So the Gemara says you're right. Sami B'Kan Rabbi Shmuel. So in fact, you don't have a riot, Rabbi Shmuel, because it's not a problem. It's not a problem. It's possible that there was an oilus tamid before that didn't have Havshet Nituach, and afterwards it did. And therefore, you don't have a raya from Rabbi Shmuel who says close number of Sinai. You don't have a raya that it couldn't have been the oilus tamid. It could have been the oilus tamid. This is an interesting pasuk. Let's look up the pasuk inside. Oh, I thought I had a chumash here. I had a chumash put away. It's in Mishpatim. I have a chumash here. It's in Mishpatim. The interesting shaila how to read the pasuk. So let's look at the pasuk inside. It's at the end of Mishpatim. It talks about these karbonis that were brought. Let's see where it is over here. Here it is. It's in Perek Chav Daled. It's Perek Chav Daled. Let's see where it is. Let's see if I can find the pasuk. You know, I'll have to look over here. We're close to pasuk. Chavdal Hey. I'm looking right at it. Okay, here it is. It says, Ayishlach esnare b'nei Yisrael v'yalu oilos. Notice there's an asnachta here after the oilos. And then it says, Vayizbechu shlomim l'Hashem parim. So the question the Gemara is about to ask is, were the oilos parim or not? So the way you read the pasuk here, the way we have it, it says, Vayishlach esnare b'nei Yisrael v'yalu oilos, period. And now a new subject. Vayizbechu shlomim l'Hashem parim. So we don't know what the oilos were. The oilos could have been any animal. We know that the shlomim were parim, but maybe you read it differently. Vayishlach anar b'nei Yisrael esnachta v'yalu oilos v'yizbechu shlomim l'Hashem parim. And both the oilos and the shlomim were parim. And that's the Gemara's question. Were both the oilos and the shlomim parim? Because there's no asnachta after the oilos. The asnachta will be by Yisrael, and v'yalu oilos gets read together with the end of the pasuk. And the pasuk is saying that both the oilos and the shlomims were paris. Or is it like we read it here, where oilos is a full stop and undefined what were brought as oilos, and it's only the zevachim shlomim that were parim? That is the Gemara's question. So let's see what the Gemara says inside. Does it say vayishlach esnar b'nei Yisrael vayalu oilos kvasim and vayizchu zevachim shlom l'Hashem parim, which is the way our pasuk reads, that the oilos were not connected to the shlomim which were parim, rather the oilos were brought with sheep and the shlomims were parim. Oidilma idi v'idi parim havu, or maybe that they were both parim. Lamai nafkamina. What's the nafkamina lalacha between something that happened in the past that we're not doing again? Marzutra Omar lepisuk taimim. The whole difference is how you read a pasuk. So let's read Rashi. Lepsuke taimim b'neginos. How you put the trump. In timer shnei meaning, if you're going to learn this two meaning, then you have to put an asnachta by oilos, which is exactly what our trop says, like we just saw in the Chumash. It would have to be a trop like an asnachta that separates the sentence, and that now we're talking about something new when we're discussing the shlomim. But if we're trying to say that the parim is explaining not only what we're brought as shlomim, but as oilers as well, then then you cannot have an asnachta after the oilers. Going pashto or revi. So that is the shaila, merely how you read the pasuk. No, it could be more of a halachic nafkamina. Besides how to read the tukim, is a halachic nafkamina. This is a story about the past. It's never repeating itself. It's up to Rabacha. What if someone said, I'm accepting upon myself to bring an oila in the same animal, the same type of animal that was over there? So now we need to know what was there. My parim havu or kvasim havu. What would be the chiyuv for someone who said this to bring? Would it be parim or kvasim? The Gemara teku. We don't have a teretz. So I wonder where does our Kabbalah come from with the trop? Because from the way we read the trop, it's pretty clear that it's separate. So I'm not sure where is that a halacha l'moshe Mashiach out trop? Does anybody know where a trop comes from?
I know the Goyim brings down many answers, many kashas
With the trop.
Right.
Hadvas Revi, the famous tickle.
Yeah, Shayim.
Okay, shkoich everybody. So we will stop here. Everybody should have a wonderful day.